My name is Tony DeVito with Chemical Specifics, and we're picking up where we left off before in our daily tests for our cooling tower. For starters, we're going to want to record the pH, conductivity, the temperature, and the chlorine or bromine level that we find in our cooling tower samples. That's 4 parameters that the city requires that you test 3 times a week. Your halogen feeds daily, you test 3 times a week to make sure that all these parameters are correct. Now, your consultant that's prepared your plan, your maintenance and prevention plan, MPP, or what a lot of people refer to as your book, has prepared a log sheet for you for your testing. This log sheet is going to contain things like the date and the time that you're taking the sample. It's going to include where the sample location is to be taken from. That should be marked. It should be indicated in your book where that is, and that should be marked with a tag so that the Department of Health comes in, they can see where you're taking your samples from. And your consultant will help you choose what the best location for you is. So we're going to go ahead and take these 4 basic tests, and then we'll talk about what additional tests that your consultants may ask you to be doing. So in this particular case, pH, conductivity, and temperature are often measured using a device, an electronic device such as this. So this pen is capable of doing all 3 readings. You may have equipment that only does pH, only does conductivity, and only does temperature individually, but in this case we have a pen that'll do all 3. So the way that this particular device works, and we'll go into this in more detail on a video on just this if you've received this from us. The way that this works is that there are 3 buttons on this. You want to avoid pressing the middle button. The middle button is a calibration button. So for the purposes of taking measurements, we want to avoid that as best we can. Okay, so for starters, the bottom button will turn the device on. Press it once, the device will go on. Press it a second time, and it'll turn the light on, the background light, make it a little bit easier to read. The top button chooses what you're reading this device with at any given time. So right now, this device is reading pH. So it's also reading temperature. There are two indications on here, pH and temperature. So we're going to be able to get both of those readings right now at the same time. So our little sampling, the cup, which goes on the end of this, keeps the probe device moist, can be used for actually inserting the sample and reading it. So I'm going to take a sample of our condenser water, or cooling tower water, that we've taken from the appropriate location, presumably almost immediately, so you can get an accurate temperature reading. And I'm going to pour it into this little cup up to the fill line. It's about halfway up. Okay, once I'm at the fill line, I'm going to take our probe and I'm going to insert our probe into that solution, and I'm going to read the pH and the temperature. Okay, so the pH is reading 7.43 and the temperature is reading about 74 degrees because it's room temperature in this room. It may be more appropriate to get the temperature from the controller or from your thermometers on the condenser water headers so that you get an accurate reading what the temperature actually is. In this case, this is the only way I can do this here. So I'm going to record our pH and our temperature. So I'm going to go down here, and our pH is recorded here, pH by meter. Okay, and right now it's reading about 7.1, so I'm going to record that. Okay, our temperature is reading about 74 degrees, 74.3 degrees. I'll record that here. And you're going to get a closer look at this, the numbers that I'm filling in here shortly. Okay, so once I've done that, now I can, in order to see the conductivity of this solution, if the light goes out, you can just press that bottom button once again. In order to see the conductivity of this solution, I have to press this tab at the top. I have to hold it down in order to change the screen. If you hold it down too short a period of time, it'll lock the screen. Then you can just press it again to unlock it. But if you hold it down just a short period of time, the next screen that comes up will be indicated with a little U and capital S next to it. That's actually microsiemens. That's the measurement that we want to use for this. You'll also, if you continue to hold it down, you'll also see a number that indicates the conductivity in terms of millisiemens, MS, or even parts per thousand, PPT, or even salinity. We don't want those. We want that mu-S, that US reading. And right now this is reading 759 microsiemens. So I'm going to record that now. That goes in our conductivity column. Okay, good. Now, the other test that we need to run for the city is the halogen level. Okay, and halogen level, as it's recorded on here, halogen means either chlorine or bromine. Most of you probably will be feeding a bromine-based chemical. So in order to do that with this particular test devices that we have here, is we have a little dip swab here. And it's a kind of a, what we used to call in the old days, like a litmus test. We take the swab, we immerse it in the sample for 30 seconds, okay, agitate it around a little bit, okay, as we do that. And after 30 seconds, if there's any chlorine or bromine that's present in this sample, it'll start to change color. It'll change from a yellow to a kind of purplish color. Okay, and I'm going to give it a little bit more time here. And this sample's been sitting around for a while, so we'll discuss that in a second. If you get a color change on it, you'll notice the color change. It'll turn purple. You'll hold it against the side of the container, and that will indicate to you free and total chlorine, the level of free and total chlorine. Okay, there isn't any in this sample, so that hasn't changed color. If it does change color, you'll read the appropriate level, what matches the best, and record the free chlorine level. I'm going to assume that it's 1 ppm for this sample. So I'm going to go ahead and record that free halogen level, or in our case, chlorine or bromine, whichever one that you're feeding. Okay, in addition to that, you want to make sure that you put the date that you're doing this work. Okay, I'm going to include our date here, and the time that you're taking the sample. Okay, good. Okay, so we've basically completed all of the tests that the city absolutely requires that you do. In addition to these tests, some of your consultants will ask you to confirm the conductivity reading by going over to the controller, the water treatment controller, and reading the level off of there. I'm going to assume that it's 750. It's a little bit different than the 739 that we measured with our conductivity pen, but it's within 5 or 10% of the reading that we got with that device. Okay, if it's more than that, you may need to calibrate the pen, the controller, or maybe even both of them to make sure that they're reading correctly. Okay, the best way to deal with that is call your water treatment company or your consultant to see what to do if you need to recalibrate the device. We'll go into more detail on how these devices work again as well. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is that he might ask you to go to the controller and read the pH of that's being indicated on the controller. So I'm going to say that reads 7.2. We read 7.1 on our pen. They're pretty close, so we're pretty satisfied that they're pretty much the same. A lot of consultants will ask you to do that to make sure that there's an agreement between the pen and your controller and that neither one needs to be calibrated immediately. They should be calibrated probably about once a month or once every couple of months just to make sure they're working correctly, even if they continue to agree like this. Okay. Some consultants will also ask you to record the inhibitor level, the corrosion inhibitor level in your system. Okay. For instance, this one asks you to enter a inhibitor level or a tracer level in this particular system. A lot of times the tracer might be a dye or it might be some other kind of material. In this case, the tracer that we're using for this sample is sodium molybdate, a corrosion inhibitor. So I'm going to go ahead and take the sample and I'm going to go through a procedure for analyzing sodium molybdate in condenser water. So we have instructions here with our test kit. I'm going to step through this so you can see basically what this particular process is like. You may not be asked to do this. It's based on what your consultant has determined that you need to do in your MPP. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the appropriate amount of sample, which is 25 cc's. Okay, there's a little level line on this test device. So I'm going to add 1 cc of a buffer solution, and I'm going to add 1 cc, 1 milliliter, of an indicator solution. If there's sodium molybdate present, this sample is going to turn red, and sure enough there is. So there is sodium molybdate present. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mix this a little bit, and I'm going to take a titrating solution, which I'm going to add drop-wise. Each drop, based on our instructions in the kit, each drop represents 2 ppm of sodium molybdate. Okay, so I'm going to add a drop, swirl it around a bit, look for a color change. It's going to change from red to yellow in this particular case. Your individual inhibitors or test kits provided by your water treatment company might differ a bit. I'm starting to get a change, and the minute you get a change to yellow, you're done. So that is about 4 drops, or about 8 parts per million of sodium molybdate. So I'm going to go ahead and record that on our log, 8 ppm molybdate. Okay, so we've recorded just about everything that we need to on this table that this particular consultant is asking for. And once we've done that, we make sure this is completely filled out. We go back and do this on, say, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We try not to miss any days because they're potentially fines. And we keep track of if there's any unusual conditions here. Now, one other word about the halogen test, the chlorine test. Okay, and there's a special consideration there. The chlorine or bromine are only in the system for a short period of time. So you want to measure while you know the chlorine is expected to be there. So for instance, if the chlorine is fed at 9 in the morning, that pump goes on every day at 9 in the morning to feed chlorine or bromine, and runs for, say, 15 minutes, you know it will have completed its feeding of chlorine by 9:15. Within about a half hour, an hour, you want to be sure to take your sample and test then. If you test before 9 o'clock, before it's started to feed, you won't find any because it won't be in the system at that point. So by testing a half hour, an hour after after the pump's completed feeding, you have the opportunity to actually determine whether the pump actually added the chlorine. Okay, so take your test then at that specific time. The other tests, they can really wait for any particular time of the day, although it's probably more convenient if you do them all together. So you might want to schedule this so you can spend the 5 or 10 minutes that you need to do this all at once. So in the next video, we're going to take a closer look at this form so that you can see up front, you can see a little bit more clearly what I'm entering here from the information that I got from these various devices. Once we get done with that form, we're going to be taking a look at the next form that you're going to have to fill out on a weekly basis. And that form is a cooling tower inspection form. This is a particular consultant. This is his format. Yours may differ a bit, but they're all going to be pretty similar. Okay, so we're going to go over this a little bit more closely so you can see what they're asking for here, what you have to do on a weekly basis in order to complete your inspection, your weekly inspection of the cooling tower, chemical feed equipment, and the operation of your equipment. That's on a weekly basis. And then finally, on a weekly basis, at probably the same time that you do that, you have to do a microbiological test. And that basically consists of going to the special location point that you have on your tower that's marked, taking a sample of the water, letting it run off for a while, taking a clean sample of the water, dipping a bioslide into the water, and then shaking it off, returning it to its container, and putting it into an incubator to stay at the same temperature for 48 hours. At the end of those 48 hours, you're going to take that reading and you're going to record it on this table so that you can decide whether or not you have to follow up with some other procedures. So, again, you have your log 3 times a week where you do your various tests. You have your weekly cooling tower and water treatment equipment inspection form, and you have your weekly bacterial slide test. Okay, so on our next slide, we'll get a closer look at these forms. Our next video, we'll get a closer look at these forms so you can get a look at how I fill these out. Thank you.